Hey guys, you may be the first ones to ever see me in a baseball cap. Not a common look for me, but hey, I'm getting a little behind again, or not where I want to be, so doing a bit of work on the weekend. Hair is pretty scruffy, COVID long hair. This is what you get. Alrighty. So I wanted to sneak a lecture in here. And so this one is really going to follow from some of the things the textbook has told you about attention. But again, I want to hit certain things a little harder because I think they're really important, and then maybe even bring them back into that framework that we were discussing. So I'm going to talk about this distinction. They call it active versus passive attention in the textbook. I've also heard it called exogenous versus endogenous attention, but we won't go there. We'll stick with active passive for this course, as that seems to be the smoothest. Just know people refer to this differently. So this slide wasn't supposed to work exactly this way, but let's do it anyway. Sudden onsets of light, sound, touch, or other stimulation can automatically pull our attention to that stimulation. So just as an example of that, oh, wow, that pulled you over there. Oh, I can't help but look at, oh, there, yep, okay, yep. So when things suddenly pop up or change in our world like that, whoops, like that, they grab our attention. Let's do one of those again. Oops, I guess I gotta go. There we go. So, when something just sort of pops up, it kind of pulls our attention over there. And that's passive attention. So let me just be clear about what's going on there. This is the environment commanding your attention. And this is the real take-home point of this, I guess. We've talked about, in that diagram, I said the part of the world that you're attending to is the part that you end up perceiving with awareness in your consciousness. But how do you end up attending to it? So one of the points here is that the world can pull your attention, and they call that passive attention. So certain events in the world can suddenly pull your mind to that event. And if you're driving in a car, and then suddenly as you're driving, some kid just pops out in front of you, that pulls your eye to that, which is good, right? Because often these changes in the environment, these sudden changes, they signal something important. Like, hey, there's a child in your path that isn't normally there. Something has suddenly appeared and deserves your attention. And so this is one of the ways our mind gets pulled to things in this sense. Let me just play those out. Salient stimuli can do the same, and you heard about that when the textbook talked about the cocktail party phenomenon, the fact that you can be in a party where there's a whole bunch of people having discussions, and so you just hear a murmur of, meanwhile you're having a discussion with somebody, and your attention seems to be focused on that person and that interaction, and yet if at the back of the room somebody says your name out loud, that can pull your attention there as well. So this is part of the story we're developing, right? Where the part of the world we're really aware of perceiving is the part that's in our conscious mind. But we are perceiving the rest of the world as well. And if suddenly something onsets where we're not attending, that can pull our attention that way. Or if something relevant seeming happens in this unattended world, it has a way of pulling our attention towards it. The thalamus is sometimes thought to be part of the brain that's involved in that sort of redistribution of attention. Okay, so that's one thing to be aware. You are not in control of total control of your attention, but you can be in control of your attention. Okay, so let me introduce you to another experiment, or a very simple task, but I think it makes this point really clearly. It's called the Antisaccade task, but let me describe the fullness of it. You would be, as a participant, in front of a computer screen, and first a dot would show up. And that dot would be in one of two colors. And so this one looks sort of a blue-gray. This one looks some sort of pink color. Okay, and what you're told is, okay, after that middle dot, there's going to be a dot at the left or right that's going to show up. And here's what I want you to do. If this is a blue-gray one, then I want you to move your eyes towards that dot. Okay, so do the natural thing, right? Because that dot draws your attention. So go ahead, go with that and look at that point. But if it's a pink one, here's what I want you to do. When the dot appears over here, I want you to fight the urge to go over there and instead move your eyes the other way to do the anti-saccade. So first of all, what do we mean by a saccade? I should step back here. This is worth just, forgetting this for a moment. A saccade is what we call an eye movement. And in fact, our eyes are constantly moving. We feel like we're looking at things and we're just seeing one thing, but our eyes are darting around and we're constantly looking at information value. And that's in fact what this attention mechanism is taking advantage of, right? Every now and then it pulls you that way and gives that a little extra oomph, like really look over here. And so we're always making these saccades. It's called pro because it's sort of natural. It goes with what we would normally do, which is if there's some onset, that would draw a saccade. And so this says, just go with it. Let your natural instinct go. Okay. But this one says, no, oppose your natural instinct. This is one of the tricks we like to play when we're doing studies where we're trying to look at how much sort of intentional or conscious will plays a role versus sort of habit. And sometimes what we like to do is pit those two against each other. And that's what this antisaccade situation is, because your habit will be to go this way. But we're asking you now to intentionally go the opposite way to overcome that habit. And so now we can ask, is conscious will strong enough to do that? And do we see a battle kind of playing out? And you do. So here's the data. So this is the pro-saccade, and this is your classic passive attention thing, right? Go with the work. And if you watch the eyes, this is saying the eye is going left. If it goes up or going, it doesn't matter if it's, yeah, okay. In this one, it means the eye is going right in this one. So right is this way, left is that way, left is down, 0 is in the middle. So what you're seeing is that this person is very quickly going to the right. Okay, it takes them about 400 milliseconds to shift their eyes over to where that's 400 thousandths of a second, just to give you a scale, to shift their eyes over to that target that just came on. But what if they have to shift it to the opposite side? Well, what you're seeing is when they're able to, which is one of the questions. Sometimes they're not able to. When they are able to, we're seeing it's taking them a lot longer. They're around 500 milliseconds. There's a whole 100 millisecond of battle going on here to overcome the shift there and pull it here. And sometimes they lose. Sometimes it loses the battle. Sometimes, despite the instructions, the person still shifts. And that's what we're seeing here. They shift to the target first, where they're not supposed to look. And then they realize they're not supposed to be looking over there. And after a period of time, they're able to shift back to where they're supposed to be looking. But here's a real battle going on over here. So, what data like this shows is just these two different modes of allocating attention, kind of battling it out. And it's kind of interesting because I'm going to talk to you about another area where they battle it out that you'll feel much more familiar with, let's say. In fact, I should have done it right here, but I may do it right here. No, I won't. Let me first talk about something related to this battle, and then we'll come back to it. And so that's this. What is this a battle for? It's a battle for your conscious mind. We've talked about our sensory systems. A fascinating thing about us is that there's all the stimulation that our mind is receiving. It's got all of these input systems that are bringing sights and sounds and feelings and knowing where our body is, and all these senses we talked about, smells, tastes, they're all coming at us at once. And it's all getting to the brain. But our conscious mind can't deal with that much information. In fact, it seems like our conscious mind can deal with roughly one thing at a time, or one sort of central idea with several facets to it. And so we have this, what we call selective attention filter, where all of this information comes in, but only, we sometimes call this a channel. One channel of information reaches awareness. So it might be something we choose to look at, something we stop and choose to listen to, a sound of a bird, something like that, etc. And so there's this battle here to get your awareness. And we sometimes refer to this as selective attention, the process of selective attention. How do you choose to select something from something else? And so one of the things I just love to kind of give you guys that scientific sense as we go through all this, that something like that, how do you selectively attend? You can study things like that scientifically as well. And let me give you a taste here. This is something called the negative priming paradigm. And let's just worry about these ones on the end here first. The task here is you see two things presented at once, and you are asked to name one of them, say what it is. Usually in this case, we'll say the red one. So what you're supposed to say here is duck. Over here, you'd say chair. Here you'd say chair. Here you'd say duck, because those are the red ones. Now, the first thing I'll mention is, imagine trial after trial where you saw things like this. 2 items, one in red, one in gray, and you were asked to read the red one. The first thing people notice when they go through a few of these trials is the gray one just disappears. After a few trials, it's like it's not even there. They just see the red. Easy as pie. Everything is just fine. However, we can see a kind of interesting thing that happens. So now I want to compare. This is one kind of trial, and this is another kind of trial. So let's start with the bottom one. This is called a control trial because now you have to say duck with shoe in the background, but notice that neither of these were on the previous one. This is a chair and a plane, so completely separate things. So you'd say chair to this one, and you'd say duck to this one. Okay, that's fine. You'd also say chair here and duck here. But the interesting aspect of this one is in order to say chair, you have to not say duck. Duck is the competitor that's in there, right? That your unconscious processes are probably picking up. And then you have to say duck. And so in this situation, what we find is people are slow. If they have to avoid saying something like duck on one trial, and then they have to say it. So in an attention word, sometimes it's said this way. If a certain stimulus is selected against, so you chose not to let that one through, then it's harder for that stimulus to be selected for subsequently. It's harder to let it through. A lot of people claim this shows that selective attention uses inhibition, that it pulls that one into awareness and it inhibits the other things. And that's especially why we have so much trouble, noticing that they're even presented. There are others. I've actually weighed in on this debate. I have a couple of papers with regard to what's going on here. We're not going to go into all the details of that, other than to give you the sense that even something like selective attention, again, if you're clever, you can start studying the mechanism and getting at, why are people slow and what's causing that? And you manipulate certain things and you figure it out. Okay, so just again to show you that even things like this can be studied scientifically. I think that's pretty cool. Okay, what's the relevance of all this? Well, first of all, let me bring you back to this because I just like to come back here every now and then. We said things that you attend to get into awareness, things that you don't attend to, you're still perceiving, and it can affect what you're attending to. What we're adding now is saying, hey, this red thing, this is not completely under your control. Sometimes it's under your control. You can choose to go looking in your environment for things, and you can take the wheel of attention. But also, every now and then, the world will take attention. Things that happen in the world will pull your attention towards them. And suddenly you find that you're attending to this kind of thing. We do not have complete control over our attention system. It can be hijacked at any minute by the world. And this creates this little dance that we were talking about of active versus passive attention and who wins. And I showed you that active doesn't always win, right? And this is relevant to a number of situations. First one, this is a slide I took from the webinar that Nick and I give about e-learning. And it's really about avoiding distraction. What is distraction? I want you to kind of notice this. So there's this notion of the instant gratification monkey. You're supposed to be here doing intro psych. You're supposed to be going through and learning. But then suddenly there's this little monkey beside you. This is sort of the world. Let's watch a bunch of YouTube videos on creatures of the deep sea and then go to YouTube Spiral that takes us through Richard Feynman talking about string theory and ends with us watching interviews with Justin Bieber's mom. This can happen to you, right? You're trying to learn and then suddenly you get pulled somewhere else by the world. And so one of the things I hope you take from this is to notice when that's happening and saying, hey, you passive attention, or if you like, you instant gratification monkey, don't take the wheel of my mind. Don't you start telling me what I'm going to be thinking about and what I'm going to be attending to. I'm going to do that. And that's when you say that's your active attention talking, right? And so this is an example of you having to battle the world pulling your attention away, distracting you. And when we think about things like this, think about notifications, on your phone and your internet addiction. Remember I pushed you towards that site where we're going to talk about your internet addiction a little bit? I'll show you a little bit of data from that in the next slide, but I'm going to put off really talking about it except to say the following. If you are sitting here trying to study, but you have your computer sending a notification every time something happens on social media, every one of those things is an instant gratification monkey. It's a little pull up saying, hey, forget what you're doing right now. Come on over here for a sec. Check out what's going on over here. And these phones can constantly be pulling us away, even while we're driving. I'll have to do a video about that because it's so important. But they can constantly be pulling our mind to places they shouldn't be. One of the bits of advice we give to kind of control the instant gratification monkey is that when you're studying, create a space that's free of those things. So don't bring your phone to the space, only have your computer. Make sure your computer's not sending you any notifications about anything. Do not have your email open or any other site where information might pop up. Just have the learning thing. And when you're in that space, just do the learning thing. And that can help you avoid getting your mind pulled 5 different directions. So by the way, those of you who did follow that site, here's a little bit of data that I got, and this is just scores. Most of you scored as a very, very mildly addicted to the internet. Some of you were moderately addicted to the internet, and there's a chunk of you considered severe. These are the severe folks. If you scored 30 and above. We're going to talk about that addiction. We talked about physical addiction. I want to talk about psychological addiction, but it all begins with those little rewards, those notifications that somebody has paid attention to a post or something, and they make us want to keep going back to our devices. We become addicted to our devices. And so I wanted you to run through that questionnaire, and we're going to bring it up a little bit more in the future. But again, it's just a great example of how that passive versus active attention is always at interplay, and it's a battle for your conscious mind. And so I wanted you to kind of get that out of this section on active versus passive. Cool. That's all I'm doing for this video. Thank you very much. Talk to you later, guys.